Welcome back. Hope you enjoyed lunch. Hope you enjoyed getting to, it seemed like there was a lot of great conversations going on, you guys meeting each other, and that's wonderful. We're going to get right on with the program again now. Waves has provided this console down here in front in sponsorship for our event in LV1, and we're going to hear a little bit from Mr. Clever here about the LV1, and very quickly after that we will go into Tony. Tony Staires is with us, who is a 20-year veteran for live production. 12 years of that has been as a production, in charge of production for a church, and he's currently working with Lavo, console manufacturer in House of Worship Outreach as well. Jeremiah.
Thank you. All right. Is everybody familiar with Waves? For the most part, yeah? A few heads, no? So Waves is a audio processing company. We do software, plug-in emulations that you can implement with pretty much any live audio digital console. But we also have created the LV1 console, which is Waves' digital board, and this is a software-based system, 64 channels. You run it on a computer, whether that's Mac or PC. We have a dedicated DSP server, and then you can run it with a combination of touchscreens or control surfaces. So it's a very flexible system, really cost efficient, and all of your processing on the console is all Waves plugins. So it gives you a lot of opportunity to take the processing that you're typically using in the studio and now take that to your live show as well. So Tony's going to be mixing on the LV1. This is his first time ever doing it. So if you have any questions, I'll hang out in the front row for you. But I just kind of wanted to give you guys an overview of what the LV1 is, so as you're seeing it, you know what it is. Some of you may have never even heard of it before. But it's a really interesting concept, and it's a really cool console. So if you guys have any questions about it later on, I'll be floating around the exhibit room, so feel free to ask me. But I'm going to hand it on over to Tony. Have fun. Thanks, sir.
All right. Everybody hear me? Yeah. Fantastic. Fantastic. So my name's Tony Staires. I do work for a company called Lavo. If you come by the booth and you see the name, you may look at it and say that is a W and not a V. But we are a German company. We've actually been manufacturing consoles. This will be our 50th year this year. And so we manufacture audio and video technology. So apart from the audio portion, we do manufacture video over IP products that do video processing, routing, multi-viewers, and things like that as well. But for the sake of AES, we're here for audio. And like I said, I've been doing audio for the past 20 years. It's hard to say 20 years, as my 40th year of life is approaching, so nearly half of my life has been spent kind of in the audio world. And much like you guys, a lot of my audio experience has been in church. I started off in live production, working for a production company, doing short tours and festivals and things like that, but my heart for ministry kind of drove me into the House of Worship, and spent a lot of years as a worship leader, creative arts director, and production director. So how many of you guys in a church, like volunteer, full-time? How many of you guys, so you can drop your hands, how many of you guys, like, sound is what you do in your church? I figured I could probably just point you out without you raising your hand, because usually the church guys have this disgruntled and defeated look on their face. So I feel your pain. I will tell you, I have worked the gamut of when it comes to mixing, from sports to live entertainment, artists ranging anywhere from opera to jazz to hip hop. And to be honest, House of Worship is one of the hardest venues to mix in. And I don't care at what level. I've mixed in churches as small as 50 and as large as 15,000, and it is hard. And I'm with you. So like, if you need a shoulder to cry on after this session, I will give you a hug despite the coronavirus, and we can hug it out and cry it out together, because I've been in the trenches and I know where you guys are. So I do kind of want to lay out some expectations. Like, this session, I'm not here to kind of wow you with my mix, because to be honest, mixing is subjective, and I think you guys know that. Week in and week out, probably feels like 80% of your congregation feels like they're a front of house engineer and know best. And I could sit here and build what I think is the greatest mix, and a third of you would leave and have an opinion about it. But hopefully what I can do is take some of my knowledge over the last 20 years, and you may have been doing this longer than me, but maybe I can give you some things that I've picked up along the way that'll help you be a better mix engineer and kind of give you a nugget. And I always feel like no matter what event that I go to and attend, if I can just leave with one thing, then it's well worth the price of admission. So hopefully I can kind of extend that to you guys today over the next hour. Good friend of mine, he is the mix engineer for Saturday Night Live, and one of the last times I sat with him, he told me this great quote. He said, mix engineer is made up of 3 parts, 1 part musician, 1 part engineer, and 1 part politician. And it's so true. And I told people for years, because like I said, I spent many years as a worship leader, many years as an audio technician and production technician, and I've always kind of felt that balance between musician and audio guy and kind of the weight of that and how that interconnects together. But that politician part, when he said that the other day, it just like, it was so true, and how we navigate relationships. And I just kind of want to pause on that for a second as far as those 3 parts. And if you're a mix engineer, and I meet a lot of mix engineers that don't play a single instrument, and they have a hard time maybe kind of finding a mix. They have a hard time, maybe it's communicating with their team. And I'll just encourage you, if you're a mix engineer, do what you can to learn an instrument. If it's guitar, if it's bass, keyboard, I really don't care what it is, because it's one of those tools that'll help you become a better engineer, not just from an audio and a listening standpoint, but from a standpoint of being able to relate to your band members. And I know for me, I'm not a drummer, I'm a guitar player, a vocalist, but for me, I know I became a better mix engineer when I learned how to tune drums. I learned how to communicate to a drummer about certain rhythms and beats that they're playing. So as a mix engineer, I could help produce the service and communicate effectively to the drummer, instead of saying, hey, don't be so loud, and when you can communicate to them in their language and where they are, you're going to go a whole lot further in being able to produce a service or come out with a mix that you're really kind of striving for. But also, being an engineer, I can't stress enough, like even for me, being in this as long as I have, I strive all the time to learn. We have some engineers on our team that have worked some of the biggest events and biggest clients in the world that teach me new stuff almost daily, and that corrects me almost daily. I'll come out and say something that I think's right, and they are bold enough to kind of put me in my place, and I'm humble enough to learn. So stay humble, and as an engineer, never stop learning. I kind of welcome the challenge today to kind of step behind this console and learn new console. And even though that I work for a console manufacturer and I'm supposed to know that thing inside and out, I always welcome the challenge to stand behind another console and build a mix. But like I said, the other part is political, and getting to know your team and getting to know their names, not just their names but their kids' names. I think goes a long, long way when it comes to how you navigate those pressures as especially a house of worship engineer. And so that's one of the things I would say, aside from anything technical I could even mention today, like if you could kind of build a bridge relationally from the sound booth to the stage, I really, nothing else I could tell you today really it could matter. Like if you leave with that one thing, like it's going to make your mix go so much further, and you won't even can't quantify it sometimes, just because it's not pushing a knob, it's not turning, pushing a fader, turning a knob, learning how to use a compressor. It's something relationally, but when you can build that bridge and how you're like, man, my mix sounds better, and I really haven't done anything different technically, but you've learned how to communicate with the team and get maybe a better response from the stage. I will say, as a mix engineer, one thing to do is to not overcomplicate your mix, especially as you begin to learn, or even maybe you're into this a long time and want to improve where you are. Sometimes the best thing to do is strip back down to nothing. Like, maybe pull all the processing off your channel strips. Maybe it's, you know, start back with just great input. Garbage in, garbage out, you hear that all the time in our industry. Like, you can't fix a bad tone. If something coming in is garbage, there's not enough Waves plugins to put on that garbage to make it better. I mean, I'm waiting for the plugin to come along, you know, to turn garbage into gold, but, you know, start with the source. And so don't overthink things and feel like you need more stuff and a bigger console and the most expensive thing on the market. If all you got's an X32, man, strip it back to nothing but just an input, you know, and a fader, and figure out what you can do to improve the sound coming in and build your mix from there. So, and also one last thing before we kind of play some tracks here. I was having a conversation with a church production director a few weeks ago. We were sitting down having lunch and trying to figure out how to train his team and things like that. And to be honest, you know, one of those pressures you may be feeling here is maybe leadership is leaning in on you and asking you to prove and you want to be here and become a better engineer. But I leaned in on the church creative director and was like, because he was telling me about the experience they're wanting and their engineers really can't get them there right now and they need some training. And I'm like, man, I'm more than happy to come in and help your engineers and help your team. But to be honest, like, until you can manage expectations on what you're looking for, like, I'm not really sure what I can offer you. And he's like, I don't really understand what you mean by manage expectations. It's like, well, you're telling me you're wanting your mix engineers to take you to a place. Well, let's kind of turn the tables. Can your band get you there? Because I hear from all the time that, like, churches want this Hillsong United experience, you know, and they got Casey and the Sunshine Band. You know, it's like, it's just not going to happen. You know, and I'm like, so manage those expectations, but when you can build those bridges relationally, you can maybe have those conversations. But I think sometimes, you know, from a standpoint of a mix engineer, it's easy to stand back and judge and say, you know, so-and-so's off pitch, or so-and-so's not playing the right part, or I'm not getting the right things. Like, you can manage those, build those bridges relationally, you can manage those expectations of really what the mix is going to sound like. And kind of finally, kind of a little final talking point here. Church is a little bit different in that when it comes to building a mix, it's not about you as an engineer. Oftentimes when I walk into a church, and actually recently I've been contracting for a local church and helping them build a mix and things like that. And one of my first questions is always, what does the pastor want? Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what I want out of the mix. If the pastor's not happy and we can't submit to his leadership, then nobody's going to be happy, because they're the kind of the God-given authority to be there and make those decisions. And then it is our responsibility sometimes to help them understand maybe the challenges and to get over some humps to get to that vision. But at the same time, too, it's also our responsibility to submit to that leadership and what they want. I used to tell people all the time as a production director, like, how do you deal with so-and-so coming to the booth, and how do you deal with getting notes about it's too loud or they can't hear the background vocals? And I say, out of the 2,500 people we have in this auditorium at a given time, I'm mixing for one person only. And that's the pastor. And if he's happy, then I'm happy. And so make sure you're having that dialogue with your pastor, and make sure you have that humble heart to say, okay, whatever he wants, I want. And if you don't have that, be honest, maybe it's just time to find a new place, a new role. I'm not saying that to be harsh, I'm just saying that to be honest, because I've been in your place, you know. And so make sure you just kind of check your heart as you really kind of lean into your craft and really kind of want to do your best, but make sure your motives are in the right place. So as Jeremiah said, I'm going to do my best to navigate around this console and kind of build some things in a mix. These are some tracks some buddy of mine out at Flatirons Church in Denver sent me, and we'll see what we can do to build a mix, and hopefully give you guys a chance to maybe ask some questions, me to answer them, and maybe give you some feedback and to help you guys as engineers. So this song called Who You Say I Am, and I'm just going to actually let this play, and probably not going to say a whole lot. I'm behind the PA, so I'm going to do the best I can. But I'm going to show you, really, I haven't done anything, to be honest. I think we got to channel 2 earlier as we were setting up the mix. And so you're going to kind of hear and see my process is what, like if I would walk into a church, and what I would do to kind of build a mix and to change things dynamically, and then we'll talk a little bit about it. So play some tracks here if you want to. Yep, there we go. If you want to get the console up.
I was lost, but he brought me his love. The sun sets free, always free indeed. I'm a child of God, yes I am. Free at last he has ransomed me, his grace runs deep. While I was a slave to sin, Jesus died for me. Yes, he died for me.
That's free, oh, it's free indeed. I'm a child of God, yes I am.
Clocking
In
issue.
my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of
Technical difficulties.
I was lost, but he brought me his love. The sun sets free, always free indeed. I'm a child of God, yes I am. Free at last he has ransomed me, his grace runs deep. While I was a slave to sin, Jesus died for me. Yes, he died. Sets free, oh, it's free indeed. I'm a child of God, yes I am.
believe it. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am chosen, not forsaken.
Talk through this for just a second. I think this is a great song. I'm glad they sent this one to me. I didn't really have a choice of what you guys sent me. I know this song fairly well. I've heard it a bunch, and it's a great song to kind of learn how to mix house of worship too. Because house of worship music is so dynamic. You know, when you listen to, you probably get a lot of feedback about volume and things like that. And I say another reason why I say house of worship is one of the hardest venues to work in, not just because of all the opinions in the room, but the style of music that we love to sing along to, and it's so dynamic, which makes it kind of difficult to manage sometimes. And a lot of times the easiest thing to do is just grab a bunch of compression, throw it on there, and kind of limit how loud it's going to get and things like that. But I find that especially songs like this, if you can move with the music, then it'll be a lot more pleasing and a lot more engaging. And so if you learn the songs and learn the music and learn to mix along with them, then just kind of being a guy that manages the level, then you're going to go a lot further. And so like this song specifically, you know, it starts off pretty heavy at the top here. So obviously, from a mix standpoint, if I were to kind of set levels and then stand back and just kind of cross my arms and let the song happen, it would feel a little bit disengaging once the first hook went through and dropped out and the vocalist came in, because as you can hear, I can hear it even standing behind the PA, because like the guitar is still kind of loud, you can't quite hear the vocals. The gain structure is pretty good here as I look at things, so it's not necessarily a gain structure thing, it's really a dynamic thing. So obviously, you can't just like set the levels and just move away, but something like this is where it would come in heavy, and this is obviously within in context of worship set, that coming out of something into the song, kind of maybe want to keep the dynamic there for the first part of the song. So for me, like I'm going to kind of get everything up to a level that I'll like there in my snapshot or whatever I'm doing, kind of get me there. But then I'm going to pay attention and know in time where that thing's going to drop out, so then I can quickly grab that guitar and pull it back, so then the vocalist sits on top. And so, and I'm going to do that because I don't want to just boost the vocal, because she's going to come in on the chorus here in just a minute. That means I've got to then pull her back down. So it's easier just to pull the guitar down, ease it back in, so dynamically you're working with the band. So something similar to this, if I can get here on a console. So I bring that out and let her come in over. She's probably still a little low. dynamically, obviously they kind of brought it in, then dropped it back out in the background vocals. It's one of those, I would kind of maybe ease in the background vocals a little bit, because it's kind of chorus is really where you want people to engage. And sometimes to engage, you need to be able to hear the vocal part, especially if it's a female leading a song, and then you got males in the congregation. They need to be able to kind of hear their part and where to sing. So being able to manage that, ease that back in for the choruses before she comes back into the verses, is very important to kind of engage the audience with your mix per se, versus just kind of leaving them there and hopefully the vocalists aren't singing too loud and things like that. But also this is kind of a training thing too with your band, to teach them like engage people. Sometimes you don't have to try to keep up with the lead vocalist either. But also something like this song, because it's got a pretty major hook as it turns around, that arpeggio that plays in the hook, is knowing where those are coming from in your mix and being able to push those out, because those are one of those things like, as you hear the song comes in, it's the catchy part, and hopefully if you've done the song enough in church, the hook is kind of what grabs you at the beginning of the song, to know like what the song is and things like that. So to be able to grab things like that lead guitar, that synth line as it comes in, stick those out a little bit in your mix, and then set them back where they need to be for the rest of the song. So being able to pay attention in the movement of the song to know where to bring those out and how much to bring those out. I can't stress enough like learning the music that you're mixing to versus just kind of showing up, pushing faders, get them to the level and stepping back is going to be, and I haven't done a whole lot here, as you guys probably saw me flipping through things. I mean, I was soloing stuff, normally I've had a set of headphones on or something like that. As really I was just kind of going through, setting some high passes on the vocals, a few other things, knowing that for the most part that's going to kind of clean things up, versus like immediately jumping to the drums and grabbing compression and things like that. Because without me doing that, there's still a beat. I may not be in love with the drum sound, but there's still a beat carrying me. But if I can begin to use high pass filters, things like that, and clean my mix up, then there's going to automatically bring me some clarity. Because honestly, as much as I even like mixing drums and I mix drum heavy, nobody's going to leave thinking your snare sounds awesome. You want people to leave being engaged in worship. And so if they can get clarity, and especially if they don't know the lyrics and where things are, bring some clarity for them to understand the vocal. Like if you can get there, that's more important than maybe finding this awesome snare sound. And I say that from a standpoint, like I'm the guy that will chase a snare drum all day long to get that perfect, attack with nice fat low end, things like that. There's some things I can show you, tips and tricks to do that. But if you don't have clarity in the vocals, it's like, well, what have you really done? It's just, for some people, it's just noise coming out. So, like I said, even keeping things simple and stripping things back to simply just coming here and dialing in a high pass where it sounds good, her vocal didn't come clear. So I turned this off. It's kind of muffled. Not much life to it. But just by engaging the high pass, it brings some clarity in. And then there's some low mid that I did out here. At 140, I'll probably bring this a little bit higher. And just subtracting just a little bit, it's like 3.5 dB off her vocal. I can hear from behind the PA. It's a lot more clear. And these are unprocessed tracks.
Yes, he died for me.
And she sits a little bit better than me. So as much as I like plugins, and I mean, even when I was mixing, on our console, our Lavo console that we had at Granger, the last church that we were at, and I've used just a ton of plugins, just because I wanted to. I love the flavor, but always knew like if I could start with just a great basic sound and clear, then like plugins were just going to kind of help me add icing to the cake. Honestly, some of this is kind of like cooking. Anybody chefs or cooks in here? It's like if you start with a bad piece of meat, I don't care what kind of seasoning you put on it, it's still going to be a bad piece of meat, right? So the same thing here. It's like if you can start with a great input and do some cleaning up, subtractive mixing, there's no sense in, especially like a vocal like this where you come in here. You shouldn't walk in and see EQs that look like this on a vocal. It's like that shouldn't happen. I see this a lot. I'll walk in to a place and it just looks like, man, it'll look like this. You're like, man, what is going on? Well, I'm trying to add some clarity. Maybe add some clarity by taking some of this low end out and not having to do all this, because as you're adding gain to your vocal or whatever instrument you're doing, or adding a gain to this filter, you're decreasing your headroom, and what you're doing as there's more chance for feedback. And if you're in a building or you're dealing with that, maybe sometimes just go back and look at your EQs, because maybe what you're doing is adding gain to your input and causing feedback. Let's listen to the chorus here. And we'll start here. But again, here I would just kind of lead with the vocalist. A little bit of drums here. Here's another thing I'm a fan of mixing. I find that bass guitar is one of the hardest things to kind of find where it needs to go, because it overlaps with the piano, overlaps with the drums, and so having kind of a clean sound and a dirty sound, I'm a huge fan of a dirty bass guitar, because that's going to really just sit well in the mix and kind of give you that bass line. So if you can do that, like even if you have, you're going through just a DI, a couple things you can do. You can either split that into two channels and come in two channels, or some consoles will let you just double patch it and have one that's real dirty, high pass it well up to, let's say, 100 hertz, 120 hertz. So it's just kind of real nice and dirty. And then you can really blend that in, and your bass guitar will sit much better in the mix. So here in the chorus, I bring those backgrounds, make sure I get them in there. Of course, you want to blend them. To me, my taste, I like to blend my background vocals, so you don't have one harmony part that's sticking out. If I had more time here, probably what I would do is I would take all of these and just send the background vocals to a nice, like, long reverb, kind of get some washy and big. And normally in this song here is where I kind of start taking things and like pushing them up and bringing the mix up dynamically, where those low parts may be, upper 80s, low 90s, like really kind of getting into the mix as the band starts engaging with people here. It starts maybe even grabbing my master output, increasing a couple dB. So there, once it reaches that, from the bridge back to that chorus, it's dynamic and everybody's engaged. Bring the guitar into the hook, bring it back out. I can't tell you how many times I've mixed this song. Went to go grab for that hook and just missed it. And I was just like, and whoever that is. I believe there's a moment here when he actually talks. Worship leaders love to do this. drives me insane. From the standpoint is, you know, they go from where they're singing really loud and then they want to talk. You know, so one of those things, if you can engage with your team beforehand and say, hey, are you going to talk in that moment there? Because I'd like to turn all the effects off and be able to really get you out in front of the mix. Like, making sure you have that conversation, you know, like, look, I'm not trying to steal your spontaneity here, but, you know, I really want to make sure you're heard, because obviously you're saying something and you think it's important. So, like, if you really think that's going to happen there, I'm going to make sure, like, turn things off and boost you up in the mix. So, like, really encourage your teams to, like, rehearse like they're going to do it in the service, and let things change from time to time, be flexible. But at the same time, too, if you can engage with your worship leader and say, is that going to happen? That allows you to respond to that moment and make sure they're there and they're heard, because I can't tell you how many times they like to do that, and you're like, I missed it, don't even know what you said. Could have just said it because I go to the bathroom, they're ready for the song to be over, you know. It's like, so, yeah, make sure you do that and spend time in conversation, and make sure you're, like I say, you're in the right place when you ask it. Not like, oh, thanks for talking again. Nobody heard what you said because, you know, you didn't tell me what you're doing, and you're whispering in the microphone. It's like, no, it's, like I said, engage with them a little bit and say, hey, I know you want to be heard, so maybe just tell me what you think you're going to do there, and I'll help respond and make sure you're there and heard. And, yeah, like I said, so here I would just be pushing the mix. This is maybe your moment to shine with your drums and get those toms in there. You can kind of lead. Because hopefully by then everybody's caught on, they're going to know the lyrics. Got a lead background vocalist there that really wants to make sure she's heard. And then you get ready for the next song, make sure your snapshots are in order and get you to the next place. So I literally could sit here for the next couple hours and mix the song and show you tons of tips and tricks, but I'd love for you guys to be able to ask some questions, and maybe you're in a unique situation that, you know, maybe I can help answer maybe an issue, or kind of, you know, be able to offer some sort of nugget for you to leave, maybe to find the best snare sound you've ever heard. I don't know. But I will say one thing I am using, and I'll give a little bit of props to Waves. One of my favorite plugins for especially kick and snare are the Smack Attack plugin. So that's going to give you, I'll actually let you hear this real quick. We don't have any sort of gate over this. I'm not on here. I'm missing something. Anyway, I'm going to show you the Smack Tech. Turn it off here. So this is without it. Sounds okay. I'll engage it here. And I can even maybe exaggerate this kind of shape the plugin's doing. But this is adding some sustain or some attack to the top end of that. Another quick plugin. Let's see if I can grab it here real quick. I'll make it mad. fat low end snare drum. Probably a little exaggerated there, but that's the torque and the smack attack plugins. So that's, of course, I'm adding some gain here. Would have to do some gain adjustments there, but adding these two plugins can give you that 60s like fat snare drum with some nice attack on the top of it. So one little nugget, trickery there. Two of my favorite plugins that Waves has at the moment, and you can never go wrong with the SSL bundle. So I'll ask for my Waves licenses later. So. Cool. Any questions? Anything I can help you with? Anything I can tell you about, explain? What you got?
So if I get the like wave grid, right, to use with live sound, does it come with any plugins already, or is it based off of the plugins that I already have?
I believe you sell a bundle that comes with a. You got the server, and you can buy like a server bundle.
Yeah, if you buy one of the Waves bundles, they come with like a starter package of plugins. But any Waves plugins that you own outside of that, you can just move over and use it in live sound also.
Yeah, and those, I think you guys did that years back, so you went from being able to take your studio plugins, move them into your live rack and back and forth.
Yep.
Yeah. So, and you can just keep them, I'll be honest, like, every so often you guys will release a plugin and give it away for free, and I'll just go into my personal account and just bring that in. So if I'm going to work a show that has a wave system, I can log in, or I walk up with my dongle, plug it in, and use what I have. For sure. Yeah. And that is one way to kind of keep things familiar when you're kind of jumping between consoles, if there's some Waves integration. Like, it's great to be able to use, like, your own dynamics and things like that in order to kind of keep things consistent, for sure. But the way Waves integrates different consoles can be a little confusing sometimes, so make sure you're kind of up to date on, like, how Waves integrates that specific console. So, I mean, everybody does it a little differently. Behringer does it different than we do it, and the way Digico does it, and things like that. So, yeah, make sure you're up to date on that. Any other questions? Comments? Smart remarks?
Do you have any tips for mixing live drums?
Mixing live drums. Maybe give me your scenario. What do you think? Like, tell me about your room or what you're kind of thinking about. Because I have varying opinions based on your scenario.
I mix in a lot of different rooms. I ran on portable.
Okay.
And so just like trying to
dial in a good like snare and kick mostly.
Yeah. Couple of things. If your room can definitely handle a live drum kit, that's great. I will say, I'll preface with an asterisk, there's a lot of venues that I walk in that probably shouldn't have a live drum kit. And it usually takes a lot of convincing. This literally happened weekend before last. The church I'd been mixing at, small venue, about 300 seat. My buddy Jeff here mixes in the same venue. Had a live drum kit on stage, bought some shy baffles, the round baffles to try it. And they're like, man, we can't, our mix just isn't there. And I'm like, we're mixing over the drums. The drums are coming off the stage at 90 dB. I can literally mute them in the PA and still hear them. And the problem is, it's then disconnected from the rest of the mix. You can still hear the drums here. The rest of the mix is coming out here. And it just from a not vision, but from a positioning standpoint, it just doesn't make sense. So, like, you guys have got to look at an electronic drum kit. Oh, why in the world would we ever do something like that? I'm like, because you have a Nord stage on stage, piano, and your guitar player is playing the Helix. So why wouldn't you look at electronic drums? Oh, these things are garbage. These things are garbage. I said, just trust me. Drive down to Sweetwater, about an hour from Sweetwater. Spend some time. I'll literally get a call 3 days later. We went to Sweetwater. Those things sound great. We're ordering a kit tomorrow. Swap the kit out. Put it in the weekend before last. I spent about an hour before rehearsal going through and tweaking the drums in the brain. and literally the first song of rehearsal, and I was the guy dialing in the drums on the thing. I thought they were playing a drum track. No lie. It was like, it sounded just like you would want a drum to sound. But backing up to if you got an acoustic kit, this is all going to be preference. I'm a low tune guy when it comes, especially when it comes to toms. I recommend a drum dial if you're not a drum tuner. I always, because I'm not a drummer, but I kind of know what I want my drums to sound like, and I carry a drum dial with me, and I kind of have some tension measurements that I have written down. But for me, it's I got my guys always joke with me that we're on my team that basically you get the wrinkle out of the drum head, and that's about where I like it as far as tension, especially when it comes to toms. So I'm definitely a low tune tom guy, and that'll help sometimes with your volume too. Go with a lower tune drum, and then you can add a little bit of low end attack in your EQ, and then compression is definitely your friend. And I'm kind of more of a higher end, like a little bit higher. I like a deep snare with a tight head. So something like even up to like an 8-inch, deep snare drum, with a really nice like 2-ply head, tension pretty tight. Same thing with the bottom snares. We were joking earlier, like the bottom snares on this snare here. Like if this was my drum kit, this bottom snare does not sound like that. I like a lot of strands, pretty tight, so I want pretty snare. This is really kind of sloppy and loose, but this is kind of what these guys prefer. One of my favorite snare drums, I'll tell you this right now, is the Ludwig Copperphonic. It's a 8.5 by 14 snare drum. It's copper. It's kind of a take on a Black Beauty, but it's an 8-inch version versus a 6.5-inch version. And it's fat, it's big, but it has a nice little crack on the top end. So just start with a great sounding drum too. Also, I'll tell you, a lot of guys for a little while were on this kind of like, and no offense to Church on the Move, everybody was kind of watching the whole Mix You thing. Church on the Move had a Roberts drum kit, or I think they actually still do. It's a mahogany drum kit. They like it for their standpoint. My standpoint, I don't like it. It's a 24-inch kick. It's all mahogany. It's really dark, so it's really hard to get kind of like really kind of punch in the mix. So much like people were following it so much, I came to a church that literally had bought the identical drum kit from Church on the Move. They called them up, so it's what you have. Called Roberts, got the identical, like same shells and everything. And as soon as I could, I swapped the drum kit out. Went to a 20-inch kick, and all maple. I'm more of a fan of a smaller kick drum. I'll tell you why. Drummers have egos, so they love larger kick drums, but the problem is most drummers don't have the foot to move enough air in that kick drum to make it sound like it's supposed to sound. So a 20-inch kick, they can't consistently hit it hard enough. And if they are, it's probably too loud to move enough air. So for me, I am more of a fan of even as small as an 18-inch kick, especially for a portable venue. Gretsch makes I think it's called a Catalina Club kit. And it's like an 18-inch kick, and it sounds fantastic. People are, oh, it's not boomy enough. And I've heard that kit in like pretty large venues, and it sounds great. So definitely paid, like back to your original questions, great drum sounds. Start with a great drum. Have some kind of realistic expectations. There's no need for a 26-inch kick in worship. You can probably get by with a 20. And you can even start with mediocre mics, but as long as you're starting with a good drum kit and making sure it's tuned. I would tune our drum kit at Granger every week. And sometimes I would tune the snare. I would check the tuning from rehearsal to the weekend. And then there was a lot of times I was retuning the snare before the weekend and sometimes between services. One thing that'll kind of save your life from tuning even more than that are lug locks, or locks you can put on the drums to keep the tension rods from pulling out. So especially if you tune as low as I like to tune drum. So yeah, that answer your question?
Yeah.
I think so. Also, like for the electric drum sets, for more of a portable setup and smaller, like say 100, 200 seat, would you recommend just automatically just going with electric?
Automatically. You can't tell me a 100-seat venue that I would put, unless you're playing jazz music, I wouldn't put in an acoustic kit. and spend the money. The Roland, I think it's the TD50. It's not cheap, but there's a lot of control in it, and that's really what you want. There's some direct outputs, so you don't have to take a stereo out, so you can get kick, snare, toms come in at stereo, overheads come in at stereo. But there's a lot of flexibility, and you can like change the mic position, you can change the depth of the drum, the type of the shell, all that kind of stuff, and get a really, really good sounding drum. Yeah. Anybody else? Get on the back.
As far as the mix,
Yeah,
using effects,
using effects.
would you coordinate that? Would you coordinate that, or would you apply if you see that it would enhance the mix?
I'm an effects guy, I will say that. I was talking to these guys as we were setting up. If this was my typical setup and I got whatever I wanted, I would have at least 2 drum verbs. I would have like an overall drum verb, and then I would have a snare verb. I would have at least 3 vocal verbs. If this was, like I said, this was my preference. So I would have 2 verbs for the lead vocal. I like a long verb and a short verb. And then I would have a big verb for all my background vocalists. And then I would have at least 2 delays. I'd have an 1/8 note and a 1/4 note delay. And the way I run my 1/8 note delay, it's kind of always in there, so it's kind of giving me a quick doubling effect. And then my 1/4 note I would use for delay throws. So like that are holding out a note, I could push it up that send and like, you know, send that last note into the next galaxy, you know. But I am a fan of effects to the point of like it enhancing the mix. Like it shouldn't be one of those things that stand out unless it's kind of something I'm really trying to feature, right? So like a snare verb should really kind of like just make it bigger, and I shouldn't be hearing, oh man, I can tell that's a plate. You know, it's like you really want it to kind of be musical and part of it. But I'd say that sometimes depending on like what you're doing, you may want the effect. The effect is part of the song. The last church I was at, we did some pop tunes, so there was times I would pull in Waves tune and kind of give it an auto tune effect or things like that, or like vocal distortion or something like that. But yeah, I'm a big fan. If you got them, use them. I think even the Behringer X32 has some decent effects. But spend some time in there, like dig into the effect and like learn how to use it.
Real-time application, would you coordinate with the group that's performing before you added that, or would you do it as you're mixing?
I mean, if I didn't know the group, I would make sure like my taste and what I'm trying to do is appropriate, but I do, even if I'm mixing for a group that I don't really know that well, I'll try to do my research and mimic, what I'm hearing on a track or, on a record or something like that. Yeah, I mean, I would try to talk to people, but, same time, like if you've kind of been given some leeway to do what you want to do, like do it, express yourself, and make it your own. Yeah. But I think to get a good sound with effects, you do have to spend a lot of time with them. I really do. Like there's very few that you can just throw it on and it sounds good. Like it's maybe it's applying high pass, low pass, or adjusting your pre-delay times on a verb, or your repeat time on a delay. It's really and a lot of times for me those change from song to song. I mean, I change my tempos for my delays every song, and then I'll even change my decay times for my reverbs from song to song. And that's part of the reason why I'll keep so many effects if I can. I'm not always in that situation. I may have to walk up to a VI or a Behringer where I'm stuck, and I just use things where I can. I try not to overlap effects as much. Like I try not to use like a drum verb for a vocal verb. I'm trying to keep them separate. But yeah, use them.
Tony, one last question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, do you use real-time pitch correction, philosophy, and technical tools? What you might use, or you stay away from that because that could be a problem.
I try to correct things at the source if I can. That's one of the hardest conversations to have with a worship team. Is when people can't sing on pitch. I do try to be honest if I'm using it. I will tell the worship leader. I may not tell the background vocalist because I'm, as front of house guy, I'm usually not their leadership. So I try to make sure I tell their leadership who can communicate to them, hey, we're using some correction. And sometimes that's good. They'll walk in and, they may just be off that day. But I will use it if I have it at my disposal. Flat irons here, they actually have some rack units. They use waves, but they actually have some really nice picture correction units. I will say they'll get you if you don't pay attention to them and make sure you're in the right key and all that kind of stuff. It will bite you. This truth, tell the truth right now. It may leave this room, may not. I literally, because of something I did, I got a girl kicked off a song for a weekend using pitch correction one time and didn't realize it was my fault until afterwards. I was set to the wrong key, and she came in and it sounded awful every time. They're like, "Oh, this is Christmas. There's no way we're gonna let this girl sing this song and sound like this." And I'm sitting in front of the house going, "Oh, we can't let this girl sing this song and sound like this." And then literally afterwards, we took her off the song, gave it to somebody else, and I had to apologize because I didn't realize I was in the wrong key with the pitch correction and got her kicked off the song. So just be aware, but I will use it. So
Thank you, Tony.
No
Let's
problem.
give Tony a
thanks,
thanks.
guys.
Join us.